Welcome to the Super Gringo podcast. My name is Sean. I'll be your host, and I'm going to either inform those who want to be, or to piss off the woke who can't handle the truth. Let's start off with some
truly major league bullshit.
By the end of this year, the deficit will be down to less than half of what it was before I took office.
Completely full of shit.
The only president ever to cut the deficit by more than $1 trillion in the
high quality bullshit.
President Joe Biden's claim that he's responsible for the largest reduction in the federal deficit in history is, in short, bullshit. In the roughly 18 months since he took office, Biden's policies have only added to America's long-term budget deficit, which is getting worse and worse as government spending outpaces tax revenue.
Let me remind you again, I reduced the federal deficit.
Hospital-tested, clinically proven bullshit.
I love it. I reduced it $350 billion.
That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit.
$1.5 trillion, the largest drop ever.
So what is Biden talking about? He's taking credit for expiring emergency spending measures. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government ran a $3.1 trillion deficit in fiscal year 2020, which fell to a $2.7 trillion deficit in 2021. Now that the pandemic spending is finally over, the deficit is expected to fall again to $1.4 trillion, according to the Congressional Budget Office, though we won't have a final figure until the fall. Once we eliminate other outlier years like 1943 when the U.S. was participating in a global war, this year's budget deficit will likely end up as one of the largest in American history as a percentage of GDP. So Biden doesn't really have anything to brag about.
Let me remind you again, I reduced the federal deficit.
Completely full of shit.
You didn't. As expiring COVID spending made our fiscal situation look better on the surface, Biden was busy adding $2.4 trillion to the long-term deficit, according to the CBO's most recent estimates. There was Biden's American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure package, and the $1.5 trillion federal budget that passed in March. If the president's multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Better plan had somehow become law, as heritage analyst David Ditch has pointed out, we'd be in even worse shape. Before Biden took office, projected budget deficits through 2031 looked like this. And here's how they look a year and a half into his presidency. The federal government's budget is on the road to hell, warned former Congressional Budget Office Director Douglas Holtz-Eakin back in 2011. That was before Obama, Trump, and now Joe Biden each went on a spending binge that has made our fiscal future even less stable. Biden wants you to focus on just a small part of the overall picture. The deficit for the past 2 years and this year are a misleading indicator of America's overall fiscal health. And to claim that he's responsible for reducing the deficit is worse than misleading. It's an outrage.
That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit.
trying to figure out how the Looney Leftists think that he's spending money but is not adding to the deficit. $1.7 trillion to an infrastructure bill that is all about quote-unquote climate change. But somehow he hasn't added any money to the deficit from the same idiots who think this time socialism will work.
Right, fried potatoes.
Now, does anyone remember when Obama was in office and he magically created jobs? All while CNN was saying that he oversaw the slowest recovery since World War II. He was playing with numbers. But his job numbers never reached Trump levels. Somehow, with the lowest job participation rate in history, the Looney Left still thinks he did a good job. Remember this one? What's he have? A magic wand? Small business jumped by 300% under Trump. Poof! Magic wand.
Let me tell you something!
The President's Latest Bogus Job Creation Claims by Matt Weidinger, AEI Diaz, February 9th, 2023. Citing a quote often attributed to the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, Mark Twain famously said there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. President Joe Biden, in his State of the Union address this week, somehow managed to combine all three in claiming credit for job creation on his watch. Here's what Biden said. 2 years ago, our economy was reeling. As I stated
Completely
here
full of
tonight, we have
shit.
created a record 12 million new jobs, more
High
jobs
quality
created in 2
bullshit.
years than any president has ever created in 4 years.
Hospital
Somewhere
tested,
between a lie and
clinically
a damn
proven
lie
bullshit.
is the president suggesting that he personally created 12 million new jobs.
That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit.
Especially farcical, coming on the heels of a massive job losses from the pandemic. As the chart below displays, the lion's share of the new jobs the president supposedly created simply reflect the continued return of jobs lost at the onset of the pandemic. U.S. Non-farm payroll employment seasonal adjustment, 2020 to 2023. All employees in the thousands. Source: Bureau of Labor Statistics. The U.S. economy experienced a record drop in payroll employment when COVID-19 struck, with 22 million jobs lost between February 2020, 152.4 million, and April 2020, 130.4 million. But payroll employment has shown almost continuous improvement since then. Between the low point in April 2020 and the latest data for January 2023, 155.1 million, payroll employment has bounced back by 24.6 million, more than filling the deep hole created by the pandemic lockdowns. But hold on, the president claims to have created 12 million new jobs. What about the other 12 plus million jobs included in that 24.6 million job recovery? As the chart shows, they returned in the 9 months before Biden took office, when 12.5 million jobs were created, using Biden's term, at over twice the monthly pace for which the president is now taking credit. So much for his claim that the economy, as reflected by job creation at least, was reeling when he took office. Still, statistics confirm that the U.S. has never before witnessed payroll employment rise by 12 million during the first 2 years of any prior administration. Of course, no prior administration took office as the U.S. labor market was rapidly recovering from an unprecedented pandemic lockdown, either just like when he said in his last year's State of the Union address that our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year, more jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The president this week saw no need to provide that important context. Especially given that dig a hole and take credit for filling it back in dynamic, it's worth considering how recent job levels compared with expert projections made before the pandemic. We can turn to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO, for that. In their January 2020 report, the Budget and Economic Outlook 2020 to 2023, issued immediately before the pandemic struck, CBO projected 135,000 jobs per month would be created during 2020, followed by an average of 59,000 per month in 2021 and 17,000 per month in 2022. Added up and prior to the pandemic, CBO projections suggested that payroll employment would average 154.156 million by the end of 2022. The figures below show how that compares with the actual payroll employment, that is, counting the effects of the pandemic and the subsequent job recovery. Actual fourth quarter 2019, 151.624 million. CBO projections, 2.532 million. CBO projections fourth quarter 2022, 154.156 million. Actual fourth quarter 2022, 154.286 million. The difference, 130,000. Source: authors' calculations using Bureau of Labor Statistics data and CBO's January 2020 report, which note that CBO's monthly job creation figures reflect the average monthly change in the number of employees on non-farm payrolls, calculated by dividing the change from the fourth quarter of one calendar year to the fourth quarter of the next by 12. It turns out that the actual payroll employment at the end of 2022 was just 130,000 higher than what CBO projected it would be before the pandemic. That's certainly impressive given all that has occurred in the past 3 years, but it's still a very far cry from Biden's boast that he created a record 12 million new jobs. I just found this podcast. They have better production quality than I have and better guests. This is an economist who's going to detail how the Biden administration is lying about jobs.
Are you fucking getting it yet? that the job market's so great. You got James Bullard. You got all of them on parade saying we got blowout jobs number. BS, okay? Number one, in January, showed 517,000 job creations. That is not for real. What we had was a seasonal adjustment. The numbers showed we lost 2.5 million jobs. But they said, January, we usually use 3 million. So poof, 500,000 jobs created. We did not create those. But what's even more egregious, take a look, Rob, just scroll through real quick to the next one. I want to show you. So this is the 517, right? It really would have been 2.5 million losses on the next one. And go ahead and scroll through if you can. And I wanted to show you the thing from the BLS. Just go to the very next slide. Just advance it to the next one.
You see the bottom left? It says the arrow. I don't know if you see the arrow.
Just advance it to the very next slide. There you go. At the bottom there, you see what says 2.5 million losses? That's from the BLS. You can't play with that. Now look at the next one. The next one's absolutely crazy, Pat. Look at these numbers, guys.
That's Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Right.
That's our government, folks.
That's our government. So take a look at what they showed from the household survey, which, as you all know, that's where
Rob?
That's where you get the unemployment rate.
Yeah, there you go.
They claimed in January we created 894,000 jobs. But what they did was they made an adjustment called a population control effect. What was that? They picked up some undocumented workers from early 2022. Now, any of us, logically, wouldn't you just go back and say, oh, let's revise the numbers? No, Pat. You know what they did? Although they were never created in January 2023, they put 810,000 jobs as created in January 2023. That's why the unemployment rate went down instead of going up. Wait,
you're kidding.
No, that's right from the BLS. That's right from the...
So those 810...
were created in 2022.
But they put it in...
2023. Now, I don't want to... This came out February 3rd. Guess what happened 4 days later, by the way? Do you know
that?
What was the big...
510?
No, the State of the Union address was 4 days later. Okay? So, now, who knows if they're related? I'm not going to say they are, and I just think it's kind of coincidental. But now when we take a look at something like this, that was what happened in January. Let's go to February's numbers. February's numbers were, I think, very indicative. If you wouldn't mind, just go right to the next slide, brother. So this shows you what it would have been. It would have been 3.9% without the seasonal adjustment instead of 3.4. Now, in February's numbers, here's what we got. It showed 311. Go to the very next slide if you can. 311,000 jobs created, right? But you see on the bottom in yellow, there was a big jump in this one category that says if you're unemployed for 5 weeks or less, that jumped by 343,000 people. So go to the next slide. This kind of illustrates it. So that's a bucket. That bucket jumped by 343,000. So what goes into the bucket? People that just got unemployed. What drains the bucket? If you either got another job or you're unemployed less than 5 weeks. If the job market is so hot, we know that the jobless claims reportedly that week were only 194,000, near very, very low. So you're not getting the inflow into the bucket, but it's not draining because people either aren't getting jobs or they're being in a position here where they're staying unemployed. That's why you see this going up.
That's so wild that they present it the way they do to say it's the lowest in how many years? Lowest in 57 years, 50-something years. Hey, it's the lowest in this, it's lowest in that. So, okay. So Barry, if what you're saying is true, and let's just say it is based on the numbers you're giving here, it's BLS. So it's not like you're getting the number from a survey, then that means the economy is worse than it really is. Is that a fair assessment?
We have less full-time jobs now than we did back in May of 2022. Much of the job gains are part-time workers. Much of the job gains are people working multiple jobs.
We have less full-time workers today than May of 2022.
You can look at
That's not good.
Now, Pat, the next one's going to really blow your mind. Check this out. Now, we got all these job gains, right? Go to the very next slide if you can, please, Rob. This one's really interesting. Do you see that chart on the bottom there?
Yes.
That chart on the bottom shows COVID.
Yeah.
But what these are is hospitality and leisure workers.
Right.
This has been the engine of growth.
Sure.
Most of the job gains have come from this category, but it's not real growth. You're just putting these poor people back to work, right? But if you notice, we're almost back to trend. Do you see that?
We're even lower than that.
But eventually, let's say we put everybody back. There's not that much more juice left to be squeezed here, right? And if you take a look at the job openings and labor turnover, known as the JOLTS report, this is job postings.
Yep.
This category last month was down 194,000. So this tells me the labor market's about to take a negative turn.
If the labor, and I'm with you, I'm fully there, and I've been saying this for a few months where I think that's the number no one's talking about. Okay, but let's go there. your background, for people that don't know your background, I mean, if you've been on a couple other times, we had you on a podcast. Your background, for people that don't know this, you have won the Crystal Ball Award for the most accurate real estate forecaster in 2017. This is through Zillow. In 2019 and 2020. You're the only 3-time, I believe, right? Okay. So you've been able to successfully forecast what's going to be happening. That's kind of what you're known for with that part of your success. You've done other things, but this is specific to this.
But we have a great team. It's not just me. Our team,
I'm sure
we have a
the
great
team is very good.
It's a team effort.
It's impossible for you to do it by yourself. You need the right people to give you the data, but still, your name is tied to you based on the data you get. These are the forecasts you made. If these numbers are the numbers you're showing, and we just had what's going on right now with Silicon Valley Bank, okay, and Powell is going to be sitting here. A lot of people were saying, well, before Silicon Valley Bank, he was going to raise the rates by 0.5 point and maybe another 0.5 point, and then back-to-back, quarter. Now, some people are saying he's not going to do anything, let alone some people are saying he may even cut and lower it. So what is your forecast based on this, based on inflation, based on Silicon Valley Bank? What do you think Powell's going to do next with interest rates?
Okay, so interest rates is very interesting because mortgage rates are going to be more determined by inflation. And the Fed will have more of an impact on shorter-term rates and also the stock market. So I believe that the Fed will more than likely have a difficult time hiking more than 0.25%. I think 0.5%'s off the table. I think maybe 0. I don't think they'll cut at this meeting. But I think that it'll either be a quarter or no move at all, maybe a pause just to see things settle down. Because remember, the Fed, by moving rates up too quickly, has caused these imbalances. Things will break. Now, the problem with the Fed is that they don't look at inflation. Mortgage rates, and real estate for that matter, will be highly motivated and driven by inflation. I have a couple of slides there, Rob, that's probably going to be in the beginning. There's a slide there how mortgage rates follow inflation. If you could see the correlation. Okay, this shows you what happens during recession. This shows you mortgage rates go down during every recession. So I believe we're headed for a recession. As a matter of fact, while we're on the topic of recession, look at the next slide. Very, very interesting, Rob. Go up one. I'm sorry. Go up one. Yeah. Why haven't we not been in a recession? Maybe we are. We already had 2 quarters of negative GDP, Pat. But take a look at credit card balances. The gray area, that's the recession followed by the pandemic. Everybody forgets we had a recession before the pandemic, 2 months before it. But credit card balances on top were way up, and the savings rate was like 10%. That big spike in savings was the stimulus. That went into people's savings account.
Fake.
But look at what they did with it. They wisely paid off their credit cards. They couldn't spend it on anything else. Notice how they drained their savings and it paid off credit cards. Then we got another stimulus check, but we spent that even faster. But what did we do? We bought a lot of name brand stuff. Then we don't worry, got another one coming. Boom. And then once that stopped, people like that stimulus lifestyle. How do you keep it going, Pat? You charge up your credit cards, which have low balances, and you drain your savings. We've gone from a 10% savings account to 3.5%, and we now owe more on our credit cards than ever in history. Even this has to have a limit sometimes, and that's where we hit the wall.
$940 billion credit card. The reports came in. By the way, savings rate was the lowest we've had since it's a long time. Since 17 years ago, I think it was 2.4% savings rate in February. I want to say these are scary numbers to see that. So again, saying that Powell is almost cornered now with this crisis to have to either not touch it or lower it. Tom, do you think Powell is going to still raise rates? Do you think he's going to delay it 30, 60 days to see how the market's going to react to this, to see if any other banks are going to react to this? What do you think Powell's going to do next?
Well, right now I think it depends on the next 48 hours. Today was a rough day on the market, but not a cataclysmic day on the market. I'm with Barry. I think a half point's off the table now. I think it's a quarter point. But if there's any jitteriness in the next 48 hours in banking stocks, like there's fallout, they still need to find a buyer for Maine Silicon Valley Bank, remember. They only found HSBC to buy the UK one, and PNC on Sunday night said, nah, I'm out. They wanted PNC, Truist, and U.S. Bank, which are the top 3 banks at the next tier. They wanted one of those, preferably PNC, because of a stronger balance sheet, to pick up United States SVB. If nobody picks that up, I think you're going to see jitters. And if there are jitters, I think Powell may go 0 next Thursday.
It's the 22nd.
Yeah, it's like we got a week, right? What's today? 14th?
13th. So you
13th. So we got a week and a day. So next Wednesday, If it's jittery, next Wednesday, Powell may go 0, but I believe he's only doing 25.
Okay, so here's a question you got to ask. How many people and how much you think Powell communicates with Biden, with Yellen? How much communication you think there's with them and Biden right now?
I think Powell sends 14 text messages a day and receives 1,400.
Okay, so how quickly you think after this event?
I'm not being funny. I'm saying, I think everybody's hammering him.
I got you, Tom. So how much you think right now a emergency call or meeting has been made with all of them to say the following? Hey, Jerome, we know we can't tell you what to do, but here's what I want you to be thinking about. We both know what's going to happen if you raise the rates a half a point. The reason why this happened with Silicon Valley Bank is because the rates increasing the way it did, and that kind of messed them up.
And they got trapped.
How many more banks like that are out there? I don't know. But if you increase it the way you were going to increase it, a point to point and a half over the next 4, 5, 6 months, this may be the time for you to pump the brakes at least for 90 days to see how this reacts. Do you think that's the responsible call for Yellen and Biden to make to Powell?
I think Yellen made that call on Friday afternoon after they seized SVB in the morning. They knew where the dominoes were going. They were watching the market. I believe that call happened before dinner time on Friday.
Does anyone think, with banks tanking, record inflation, that the economy is booming, like old Puddin' Brain is saying?
Hospital-tested, clinically proven bullshit.
I'm tired of hearing this one, 7 years after the fact. It happened last week while I was making this podcast. Well, Durham said there was no evidence for a FISA warrant. Moving along there, Sling Blade.
I picked up a Kaiser blade that is sitting there by the screen door. Some folks called it a sling blade. I call it a Kaiser blade.
It was a hoax then. It's a fucking hoax now.
Trump, Putin, Russian collusion.
Trump, Russian sort of collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion. Trump, Russian metal collusion. Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, potentially collusion.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, collusion. Trump, Russian collusion. Trump, Russia, possible collusion. Russia hacked our election. Here comes a big change. Because all of a sudden, Trump, Russian, possible collusion, Russian collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion. Trump, Russians, collusion.
Collusion with the Russians. Trump, Russia, possible collusion. Trump, Russia, possible collusion. Prove collusion. Prove collusion.
Was there collusion?
Absolutely.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion. 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 Trump, Russia, potential collusion. Trump, Russia, potential collusion.
And the Kremlin and be in collusion with Putin. And the Kremlin and be in collusion and Putin. And the Kremlin and be in collusion with Putin. And the Kremlin are very worried in collusion. This president in collusion with Putin. And the Kremlin and be in collusion. This president in collusion with Putin. And the Kremlin are very worried in collusion.
All 17 intelligence agencies.
17 agencies.
17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed.
17 different United States intelligence agencies.
All 17 of them.
People are very worried.
From the American Bar Association, March 25th, 2019. Top legal news of the week. Mueller finds no collusion with Russia, leaves obstruction question open. Special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation did not find sufficient evidence that President Donald Trump's campaign coordinated with Russia to influence the United States 2016 election and did not take a clear position on whether Trump obstructed justice. Mueller concluded his 22-month investigation and submitted a report to Attorney General William Barr on Friday, March 22nd. Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein reviewed the report over the weekend and filed a 4-page summary of the report to Congress Sunday afternoon that was also released to the public. In his letter to Congress, Barr summarized the Mueller investigation as looking at two areas: interference by Russia in the 2016 presidential election and obstruction of justice. The special counsel found that Russia did interfere with the election, but did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts, despite multiple efforts from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. As far as obstruction, the Mueller report laid out facts on both sides, but did not reach a conclusion. Barr's letter said that the special counsel states that while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. But Barr said that he and Rosenstein had concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Mueller and his team filed charges against 37 defendants, secured 7 guilty pleas and 1 conviction at trial. 6 former associates and advisors of President Trump were among those charged. The case of Trump's former deputy campaign chairman, Rick Gates, was transferred Saturday from special counsel's office to federal prosecutors in Washington. While no more indictments will come from the special counsel, investigations of Trump, his campaign, and his businesses continue in Congress and federal and state jurisdictions in New York, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Barr pointed out in his letter that parts of Mueller's report dealt with grand jury testimony and would need to be reviewed and possibly withheld from Congress and the public. There has been wide bipartisan support that the original Mueller report be released and that Congress and the public have access to the report's source material. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, said that Congress must see the full report and all the evidence and was willing to use subpoena power to secure those. It was just announced there was no collusion with Russia, Trump said Sunday. It was a complete and total exoneration. Trump also added that the investigation was illegal, but did not elaborate.
You talk about a good bullshit story.
And the Wonder Tards are still trying to say that Trump colluded, even though we know the dossier was
bullshit.
Fuck off past the deer stand. So, the Looney Left used the FBI to attack a political opponent, shocker from the oldest, the largest, and the most successful hate group in American history. I'm sure if they thought they could get away with it, old Don would have voluntarily ceased to exist himself. You know, without a pew-pew and in the back of his head. Now, I want to address the lie that red states have a violent crime problem. Every time you get into there is no systemic racism, or Chicago is an example of what not to do about gun crime, they want to jump to crime stats. If these red states want to get rid of violent crime, throw all the loony leftists out of your fucking state.
Well, what the fuck?
Facts are powerful and stubborn things. Unfortunately, some on the left have tried to advance their arguments by using facts about state murder rates that, while technically true, are at best meaningless when taken out of context and at worst misleading and downright dangerous when used as a basis for public policy decisions. Enter the red state murder problem. It sounds ominous, but it's not.
Hospital-tested, clinically proven bullshit.
It's also highly misleading. Those on the left know that their soft on crime policies have wreaked havoc in the cities where they've implemented those policies. It's not hard to understand why reforms such as ending cash bail, New York City, defunding the police, refusing to prosecute entire categories of crimes, letting thousands of convicted felons out of prison early, significantly cutting the prison population, and other progressive ideas have led to massive spikes in crime, particularly violent crime, including murder, in the communities where those on the left have implemented them. Left-wing politicians and their backers recognize that the rising crime rates and the lack of general sense of safety that follows are a problem for them and their chances for re-election. In fact, recent polls show that voters care a lot about rising crime, an issue that is second only to the rising rampant inflation and the lackluster economy. But you keep voting Democrats, you wonder tards. So the left is engaging in political traditions as old as time. Mystification, finger pointing, and blame shifting. One liberal organization, the Third Way, even went so far as to publish a study.
Bullshit.
Arguing that the Republicans are actually to blame for the spike in numbers across the country. You mean Chicago's murder problem is caused by conservatives, although Chicago hasn't had a Democratic mayor since 1932.
Completely full of shit.
The not-so-subtle suggestion the study pushes is that those on the left are not responsible for rising crime rates because crime is rising everywhere, especially in Republican-led states.
That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit.
Fighting for their political survival, left-wing politicians such as Gavin Newsom and Larry Krasner have recently started to parrot the results of this study. But crime tends to be a hyper-localized phenomenon. State-level data are generally meaningless, except as a tool with which to score political points. More to the point, when the crime statistics from the deep blue big cities within these otherwise deep red states are removed, what happens? The state-level crime rates fall, in some cases dramatically. Until recently, crime, including violent crime, had been declining across the United States since the peak of the last crime wave in 1992. Not surprisingly, since incarceration trails crime waves, incarceration rates have also been falling dramatically since they last peaked in 2008. Unfortunately, however, the 25-plus year drop in crime since 1992 has ended for many cities across the United States. The rise in crime, especially violent crime, started taking place around 2015 after the confluence of a series of events that took place over the course of a few years. Those events include police-involved shootings of black community members, the defund the police movement, the election of rogue prosecutors funded or inspired by George Soros and other elitist billionaires, and the Ferguson, Minneapolis effect, by which unwarranted public scrutiny of police resulted in police drastically reducing proactive policing. Crime was rising in select cities across the country before the global COVID-19 pandemic struck in March 2020. But it rose even more significantly after the death of George Floyd on May 25, 2020. So, a fentanyl overdose caused a rise in crime. The cumulative effect of these events contributed to, and in large part, set the conditions for increased crime across much of the country, especially in cities where the toxic trio of rogue prosecutors, defund the police zealotry, and demoralization and demonization of the police existed. In those cities and others with some mixture of this toxic trio crime has exploded across most categories, including but not limited to murder. As the old saying goes, the best defense is a good offense. So instead of defending their calls to defund the police, the election of pro-criminal rogue prosecutors, or their pattern and practice of demonizing police, some on the left have decided to flip the narrative and argue that it is the Republican states that have the real crime rate problem, especially when it comes to murder. On March 15, 2022, a left-wing advocacy organization called The Third Way published a 15-page study,
high-quality bullshit,
with the provocative title The Red State Murder Problem, written by Jim Kessler, a longtime Democratic policy director, to Representative Senator Charles Chuck Schumer from New York, fuck you, and Kylie Murdoch, a former intern for Congresswoman Barbara Lee and volunteer for Elizabeth Warren for president. The study states that murder rates are far higher in Trump voting red states than Biden voting blue states. So that the reader won't miss the political drift, the authors add, and sometimes murder rates are higher in cities with Republican mayors. The crime rate is the number of crimes reported to law enforcement agencies for every 100,000 persons within a given population. It's calculated by dividing the number of reported crimes by the total population. The result is then multiplied by 100,000. Not surprisingly, dozens of media outlets, including The Washington Post, The Hill, Inside Edition, PolitiFact, The Daily Beast, Los Angeles Magazine, San Francisco Examiner, NBC News, and others picked up on this study and breathlessly reported on its findings.
There's enough bullshit in the media for Texas to open a branch office.
Even Paul Krugman, New York Times opinion columnist and economist, has joined the echo chamber, albeit with an unconvincing and divorced from reality opinion piece wherein he opines that nobody knows for sure what caused the surge. We have a pretty good idea, and many voters apparently are starting to figure it out as well.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
The study authors and those reporting its results took advantage of the fact that the average reader doesn't know much about crime trends, how crime rates are calculated, and at what level, at city, county, or state level, these statistics should be reviewed. Because of that, the third way study sounds important and shocking to most readers who visit these news websites. As noted earlier, however, most crime is hyper-localized, so the fundamental flaw with the study, and the reason it doesn't deserve any serious consideration, is that the murder rate in each state is largely a function of the large number of murders in a state's biggest city or cities. A supermajority of those cities, even in otherwise red states, are deep blue and run by left-wing zealots. When you remove the crime-infested, homicide-riddled cities for the state and murder rates featured in the third way study, you dramatically lower the murder rates for that state, upending their conclusion and exposing the piece for what it really is, a straightforward attempt at political projection dressed up as a study.
Hospital-tested, clinically proven bullshit.
Said another way, Kessler and Murdoch did their level best as political operatives to blame their rising crime that leftist policies at the city and county levels have caused. While a state's murder rate is perhaps politically interesting, a more accurate reflection of what is happening, actually happening on the ground, is gained by reviewing localized murder rates, such as murder rates in a city or county. What does this review show? List 1, listing 30 cities with the highest murder rates in the United States as of June 30th, 2022. Not surprisingly, of those 30 cities, 27 have Democratic mayors, the exceptions being Lexington and Jacksonville, which have Republican mayors, and Las Vegas, whose mayor is an independent. And within those 30 cities, there are at least 14 Soros-backed or Soros-inspired rogue prosecutors. Those Soros-bought and paid for inspired rogue prosecutors include Jason Williams, New Orleans Parish District Attorney; Marilyn Mosby, Baltimore City State's Attorney; Kim Gardner, St. Louis Circuit Attorney; John T. Chisholm, Milwaukee County District Attorney; Larry Krasner, Philadelphia District Attorney; Kim Fox, Cook County, Chicago State's Attorney; Raul Torres, Bernalillo County, Albuquerque District Attorney; Mike Freeman, Hennepin County, Minneapolis Attorney; John Crusoe, Dallas County District Attorney; Glenn R. Funk, Nashville District Attorney General; Santana de Berry, Durham District Attorney; George Gaskin, Los Angeles County District Attorney; Chesa Bodine, San Francisco District Attorney; and Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, who's letting dangerous criminals go 44 times, all while prosecuting Marines and Donald Trump on process crimes, trying to influence a presidential election. There were 2,554 homicides in those 30 cities through June 2022. In the 14 cities with the Soros-backed rogue prosecutors, there were 1,752 homicides, representing 68% of homicides in the 30 top homicide cities in the United States. Every Soros rogue prosecutor listed above is a Democrat. For a deeper dive into the numbers, Dr. Kevin D. Diaratna performed a more detailed analysis by examining how states' homicide rates are influenced by particular high-crime counties. Although the authors of the Red State Murder Problem provide the state-by-state data used in their study, they do not directly provide the county-level data necessary to answer this question. County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, CHR&R, a program of the University of Wisconsin Population Health Institute, however, does provide this comprehensive data. Specifically, CHR&R provides detailed data on healthcare, education, economic and demographic variables, including homicide rates and overall state populations on a county-by-county basis all across the country. Table 2 provides homicide rate rankings across all 50 states based on homicide data from 2014 to 2020. Closer examination of the local officials in the counties and cities listed above reveals that the vast majority of them are Democrats. In Hinds County, Mississippi, District Attorney Jody E. Owens and all 5 members of the Board of Supervisors are Democrats. In Jackson County, Mississippi, District Attorney Angel Myers Mokorath is a Republican, as are 4 of the 5 members of the Board of Supervisors, but the City of Jackson Mayor Jacqui Antar Lumbumba is a Democrat. Jefferson County, Alabama, the Board of Commissions consists of 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. District Attorney Danny Carr is a Democrat, as is Birmingham Mayor Randolph Woodfin. The Montgomery County, Alabama Board of Commissions consists of 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. District Attorney Darrell Bailey is a Democrat, as is Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed. The elected officials in the city of St. Louis, Missouri are all Democrats. The 28 members of the Board of Aldermen are all Democrats, as our city circuit attorney, the equivalent of a local district attorney, Kim Gardner, and Mayor Tishara Jones. St. Louis County is equally lopsided, with the elected Democrats, including 5 of the 7 members of the county council and district attorney Wesley Bell. The city of Columbia, South Carolina, is unique in that it straddles 2 counties, Richland and Lexington. Richland County's solicitor, the equivalent of the local district attorney, Byron E. Gispin, is a Democrat, as are 9 of the 11 members of the Richland County Council. Lexington County Solicitor Rick Hubbard is a Republican, as are all 9 members of the Lexington County Council.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
In Bernalillo County, New Mexico, which includes Albuquerque, 4 of the 5 members of the Board of Commissioners are Democrats, as are Mayor Tim Keller and District Attorney Raul Torres. In Shelby County, Tennessee, 9 of the 13 members of the Board of Commissioners are Democrats, as are Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland and Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy. In Davidson County, Tennessee, members of the Metropolitan Nashville Council are all listed as nonpartisan. However, both District Attorney Glenn Funk and Mayor John Cooper are Democrats. 15 of the 17 members of the Cook County, Illinois, which encompasses Chicago, Board of Commissioners are Democrats, as are Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, the first Soros rogue prosecutor, and Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who I guess just got a job at Harvard, I think. What's she going to teach? What not to do? What did they do? They elected another loony leftist mayor. Do you know the definition of crazy? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome.
Damn, an imbecile. Like the dumbest motherfucker that ever lived. Everybody knows you never go full retard. You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
9 of the 14 members of the Pulaski County, Arkansas Quorum Court, the county government's legislative body, are Democrats, as are Mayor Frank Scott Jr. and prosecuting attorney Larry Zegley of Pulaski County, which encompasses Little Rock. In Georgia, all 7 members of the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners are Democrats, as are District Attorney Sherry Boston and Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens. DeKalb County encompasses the eastern section of the city of Atlanta. 4 of the 7 members of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County, Georgia, which encompasses the rest of Atlanta, are Democrats, as is District Attorney Fannie Willis. The authors of the Third Way study either intentionally neglected or simply don't understand that criminal justice system within the 50 states is not a homogeneous nationwide system, but rather an amalgamation of thousands of microcosms consisting of federal, state, county, and local law enforcement agencies and prosecutors, and unique approaches to the enforcement of state law. There are, for example, 3,143 counties in this country. Violations of state law are prosecuted largely at the county or city level. Your public safety as a resident is dramatically impacted by your district attorney and whether he or she is a Soros rogue prosecutor or a law and order prosecutor, by your police department, and by whether the local politicians support and adequately fund the police and prosecutors' offices. This is why the Soros Road Prosecutor movement has concentrated its fire at identifying, recruiting, and funding candidates for local district attorney races. By elevating pro-criminal, anti-victim zealots into office, the Road Prosecutor movement destabilizes the safety of the community, treats criminals as victims and the police as the criminals, and ignores real victims. Whether a state or a whole voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden has nothing whatsoever to do with the homicide rates within its constituents' parts. The authors of the Third Way study are either oblivious to this fact or, if suspected, are aware of this, but nonetheless determined to flip the political narrative. As is demonstrated, however, the high murder rate is almost exclusively cabined in cities run by Democrats and with Democrat district attorneys, many of whom are Soros bought and paid for road prosecutors or inspired by Soros, groups like the egregiously misnamed Fair and Justice Prosecution and other battering rams of the movement. As Table 2 illustrates, Washington, D.C. has the nation's highest homicide rate at 19.846 homicides per 100,000 residents, yet is completely neglected in the red state murder problem. Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi are also highly ranked with homicide rates ranging from 13.390 to 10.728 per 100,000 residents. Louisiana's homicide rate is heavily dependent on Orleans Parish, which has a homicide rate of 36.126 homicides per 100,000 residents. Removing this locality drops the state's homicide rate from 13.390 to 11.302, and a 15.59% reduction. Alabama's overall homicide rate is also heavily influenced by a few localities. For example, removing Jefferson County drops the state's homicide rate from 10.728 to 9.001, a 16.10% reduction, and removing Montgomery County drops the homicide rate to 10.220 and 4.74% reduction. Dropping both lowers the homicide rate to 8.314, a 22.51% reduction, and would lower the state's ranking on Table 2. From 4th to 8th in the nation, these dramatic drops are illustrated in Chart 1. Missouri's overall homicide rate is marked by similar behavior. St. Louis City and St. Louis County heavily influences the state homicide rate, having 46.235 and 14.387 homicides per 100,000 residents, respectively. Removing St. Louis City lowers the state's homicide rate from 9.363 to 7.482 per 100,000 residents, a 20.09% reduction. Removing St. Louis County lowers the homicide rate to 8.395 per 100,000 residents, a 10.34% reduction, while dropping both counties reduces the state's homicide rate by 35.17% to 6.070 homicides per 100,000 residents. These
Let me show you something!
Chart 2, looking at Table 2, removing both counties drops Missouri's homicide ranking from 5th to 20th in the nation. New Mexico's homicide rate is heavily dependent on Bernalillo County, encompassing the city of Albuquerque. Bernalillo County is the state's most populous city and has a homicide rate of 10.241 homicides per 100,000 residents. Removing this county lowers the state's homicide rate from 8.403 to 7.511 per 100,000 residents, a 10.62% reduction, and lowers the county's homicide rate from 8th to 11th in the nation. Georgia's homicide rate is heavily influenced by crime in Atlanta, encompassing Fulton and DeKalb counties. Dropping these two counties, which have homicide rates of 13.407 and 13.272 per 100,000 residents, respectively, causes the state's homicide rate to fall from 7.264 to 5.999, a 17.3% reduction in the state's ranking in Table 2 to fall from 13th to 21st in the nation. Arkansas's homicide rate is impacted by Pulaski County, which has 7.199 homicides per 100,000 residents. Removing this county drops the state's overall homicide rate from 7.688 to 256, a 18.63% reduction. Tennessee is heavily influenced by crime in Memphis and Nashville, removing Shelby County with a homicide rate of 23.424 per 100,000 residents. Surrounding Memphis results in a reduction from 7.783 to 5.327 per 100,000 residents, a 31.56% change, dropping Davidson County with a homicide rate of 12.074 per 100,000. Surrounding Nashville results in a reduction from 7.783 to 7.299 per 100,000 residents, a 6.22% change. Dropping both counties brings down the state's homicide rate to 4.432 per 100,000 residents, a 43.05% reduction, and lowers the state's national ranking from 9th to 27th. Finally, Cook County, Illinois is another highly influential county. Home to Chicago, Cook County boasts a homicide rate of 13.99% per homicides per 100,000 residents, and dropping it from the state's overall homicide calculations lowers the state's rates from 7.746 to 3.476, a 55.1% reduction. This reduction causes the state's ranking in Table 1 to plummet from 10th to 36th in the nation. It is apparent that some states' homicide rates are determined heavily by crime in certain counties. It is thus naive and nonsensical to make partisan claims about states' overall crime rates while completely neglecting how various localities contribute to these rates. One of the left's talking points is that COVID-19 caused, or at least contributed to, the general rise in crime, and that the rise in crime started during the pandemic. There are no reputable studies that prove that crime increased as a direct result of COVID lockdowns, which makes sense. Many people across the country were locked down, including in the inner cities where most crime takes place. What the data do show is that crime, including violent crime, was rising in the cities with the toxic trio prior to the onset of the pandemic, and the death of George Floyd, which happened in May 2020, led to a rise in murders and auto theft in key cities. But numbers themselves do not begin to tell the whole story of why crime rates in these homicide hellholes have risen. Starting in 2016 with the election of the first Soros rogue prosecutor, Kim Foxx in Chicago, cities with rogue prosecutors have imposed policies that each and every one of them, ensure to the benefit of criminals. As we have detailed in our scholarship for the last 2 years, these policies include, but are not limited to, refusing to prosecute entire categories of misdemeanor crimes, including theft, drug possession, shoplifting, receiving stolen property, breaking and entering, destruction of property, disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and more. Forbidding prosecutors from including sentence enhancements or allegations of prior convictions or special circumstances for egregious crimes or actions. Forbidding prosecutors from seeking the death penalty in any case. Forbidding prosecutors from seeking life without parole sentences for any crime. Refusing to prosecute violent teenagers in adult court for such crimes as murder, child abuse, and rape. Requiring prosecutors to ask for the release of duly convicted violent felons whose appeals have been denied after these felons have served at least 15 years of a longer sentence. Prohibiting or limiting prosecutors from asking for bail to ensure the presence of the defendant at the next court hearing and or taking into consideration the defendant's prior criminal record. The foregoing policies and dozens of other pro-criminal anti-victim policies have contributed to the lawlessness across blue cities and the steep rise in crime rates. To suggest now that Republican elected officials who have followed different policies have contributed to crime increases is at best laughable.
Completely full of shit. High quality bullshit. Hospital tested, clinically proven bullshit. That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit.
This list started with 10 items. To make this list, either one loony leftist had to exhibit the behavior over and over, or multiple loony leftists have to exhibit the listed behavior over and over. I've actually had one continually doing the listed behavior while asking me for sources. My question, do you read what you post before you post it? Holy shit, are these people fucking stupid? Virtues of the woke as of June 2023. 1. You are what your imagination says you are. 2. Obedience is strength. 3. Bravery is dangerous. 4. Victimizing yourself is powerful. 5. Self-responsibility is someone else's responsibility. 6. Reality isn't real. 7. Giving a baby a death sentence out of convenience, perfectly fine. Putting a convicted murderer to death after a trial and conviction, just too much. 8. Will utter the words over and over, follow the science, all while ignoring science. 9. Thanks to Jamie Lee Curtis, who didn't know how many Oscars she'd won, they them can't fucking count. 10. They will riot in protest to take a real black woman off a syrup bottle, only to put a fake white woman on a beer can, all while saying, I can't believe they're so upset about a beer can. 11. Will lose their mind if you don't think they're special because they were born into one of the CRT-approved victim groups. You believe deeds and personal responsibility warrant pride. Trying to explain to a loony leftist about things you can be proud. I served my country for 23 years, retired, wrote a couple books, raised 4 kids, and graduated college with a 3.9 GPA. So what are you proud of? Looney leftist. Well, I gobble cock or eat the vag and tell kids about it. We'll add 666 to their user. The 12 will add 666 to the username on their social media profile just to try and shock you. Unlike the other 1,000 people that have 666 on their username profile. What's hilarious, they're the ones who always bring religion into any discussion about grooming kids. 13 will lie even with irrefutable evidence. 14. Being so filled with hate, they will groom, mutilate, and murder their own children, all while calling their opposition fascists. 15. Believes that out of 7 billion people on the planet, white, straight males are somehow oppressing everyone else. 16. Will refer to a biology book as right-wing propaganda. 17. Will lose their shit if you actually use proper English instead of their made-up fucking pronouns. 18. When you're simply talking science and common sense, they will try to bring religion into it. 19. Will use unrelated behavior to justify their sick grooming behavior. 20. Will use a stupid emoji, normally the laughing emoji with tears, when confronted with common sense and facts. 21. Have been normalizing mental illness for decades, but it's a gun problem, not a mental health problem. 22. Run around screaming, that wasn't real socialism! 23. When they can't counter your copy and paste, they will just use the words copy and paste over and over. 24. Will set fire to your business while calling you a fascist. 25. The same people who say you can't indoctrinate kids to be gay with a book or a drag show will continually accuse the church of doing that very thing, although religion isn't taught in schools and you're not forced to go to church. 26. Well, you know, the church, blah, blah, blah. Well, then don't go to church. It's not against the law. Not going to school is. 27. Will call you triggered while insulting you because they're triggered. 28. The same people who lost their shit over To Kill a Mockingbird and Huckleberry Finn will scream about banning books with oral sex and masturbation in school libraries. 29. Will ask you if you're mad while posting insult after insult because they're mad. 30. Will scream, what about January 6th? While setting fire to your business. 31. When called out for number 13, lying with irrefutable proof, will resort to insults as they can't handle the truth. Delusional, characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. Patients with schizophrenia may show dysfunctional impulsivity and impulsive aggression. Also, it's June. I would like someone from the Alphabet Mafia to explain what they're proud of. So you're born gay. Looney Leftist. Yep. So you basically got a month for sliding down the birth canal without getting fucking lost. Remember what you did what you did in your bedroom was something you didn't advertise on a billboard or hold a parade to celebrate? Me trying to explain to a loony leftist about things you can be proud. I served my country for 23 years, retired, wrote a couple books, raised 4 kids, and graduated college with a 3.9 GPA. So what are you proud of? Loony leftist. Well, I gobble cock or eat the veg and tell kids about it.